you ever wonder how a guy who is literally on China's most wanted list ends up managing billions for one of the greatest investors who ever lived? Here's the story nobody talks about. June 4th, 1989, Tiananmen Square, Beijing. Li Lu is 23 years old, and from what I've pieced together from his rare interviews and documented accounts, he's been awake for something like 60 hours straight. The square is packed with hundreds of thousands of students, and Li is one of the protest leaders, one of the faces of the democracy movement that's been going on for weeks. Now here's what we know for certain from multiple documented sources. The Chinese government has just declared martial law. Tanks are rolling into the city. And at some point in the early morning hours of June 4th, based on survivor accounts and Li's own later statements, the shooting starts. Students are running everywhere, chaos, screaming, and Li Lu somehow makes it out alive. But here's the thing, and this is documented, his name goes on a most wanted list. The Chinese government is hunting the protest leaders. If they catch him, he's facing prison or worse. What happens over the next few months, how he escapes China, makes it to America with basically nothing, and eventually becomes the guy Charlie Munger calls his secret weapon and trusts with billions of dollars. That's the story we're breaking down today. I'm Alex Morgan, this is Behind the Billion, and today we're going deep on Li Lu, a name you've probably never heard unless you're deep into the value investing world. And look, I spent the last week reading everything I could find about this guy, which honestly wasn't that much because Li Lu is incredibly private, like almost pathologically private. There are maybe 3 or 4 substantial interviews he's ever given. But here's why this story matters. This is a guy who went from being literally hunted by the Chinese government to managing money for Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, one of the most selective investors in history. Munger, the guy who's famous for saying no to almost everyone, called Li Lu his secret weapon. Think about that for a second. Charlie Munger doesn't throw around compliments. He doesn't partner with people easily. And yet he trusted this refugee from China with billions of dollars of his family's money. So who is Li Lu? Why don't more people know his name? And what did he do to earn that level of trust from one of the greatest investment minds who ever lived? That's what we're unpacking today. Now, I'll be honest with you, some parts of this story are well documented. We've got interviews, we've got records, we've got verified facts. Other parts, I'm piecing together from limited sources, and I'll tell you when I'm speculating versus when I know something for sure. But the overall arc. The pattern of how this guy built his life and his career, that's crystal clear. Here's the setup. Li Lu is born in 1966 in China, right in the middle of the Cultural Revolution, one of the most chaotic and brutal periods in modern Chinese history. His parents are intellectuals, which during the Cultural Revolution is basically a death sentence for your career and your safety. Red Guards, Mao's paramilitary youth groups, are targeting intellectuals, destroying traditional culture, sending people to labor camps. And Li Lu, as a young kid, gets separated from his parents. From what he said in interviews, he doesn't see them for years. He's essentially raised by relatives in different parts of China, moving around, and this is a child growing up in poverty, in chaos, watching his country tear itself apart. Now, think about what that does to a person psychologically. You're a kid, you don't know where your parents are. You're watching violence and political insanity unfold around you, and you're learning very early that the world is unstable, that safety is an illusion, that you need to be smart and adaptable to survive. That's the foundation of Li Lu's character. By the time he's a teenager, China is starting to open up. Mao has died, Deng Xiaoping is in power, and there's this brief window where Chinese students can dream about reform, about democracy, about China becoming a more open society. Li enters Nanjing University in the mid-1980s. He's studying physics initially, but he's also becoming politically aware, reading Western philosophy, economics, ideas about freedom and democracy that are technically forbidden but are circulating among students. And here's where the stakes start to escalate. In 1989, students across China are getting frustrated with corruption, with the slow pace of reform with the authoritarian government. And in April of 1989, a reformist leader named Hu Yaobang dies, and that becomes the spark. Students in Beijing start gathering in Tiananmen Square to mourn Hu Yaobang, but it quickly becomes about more than mourning. It becomes a protest movement demanding political reform, freedom of speech, and end to corruption. And this thing grows, I mean it absolutely explodes. By May of 1989, there are hundreds of thousands of students in Tiananmen Square. International media is there, cameras everywhere, and the whole world is watching. Li Lu, who's at Nanjing University, somehow makes his way to Beijing and becomes one of the protest leaders. Now, I don't know exactly how he ended up in a leadership position. The details are murky, but from what I've read, he was charismatic, he was articulate, and he believed deeply in what they were fighting for. But here's the thing about being a protest leader in an authoritarian country. You're not just taking a risk, you're painting a target on yourself. And in late May, the Chinese government declares martial law. Troops start surrounding Beijing. The students know something bad is coming, but they stay in the square. Some are starting to leave, the movement's fracturing, but a core group remains. And then June 3rd into June 4th happens. Let me take you back to Li Lu's early years, because to understand how he survived what comes next, you need to understand where he came from. 1966, China. Mao Zedong launches the Cultural Revolution, and the country descends into chaos. This isn't just political upheaval, this is societal collapse. Mao is trying to purge capitalist and traditional elements from Chinese society, and he unleashes the Red Guards, these young zealots who attack intellectuals, burn books, destroy temples, send millions to labor camps or to their deaths. Li Lu's parents are intellectuals. His father, from what limited information is available, was educated, worked in some kind of professional capacity, and that makes him a target. During the Cultural Revolution, being an intellectual is dangerous. You can get denounced, beaten, sent to the countryside for re-education, which is code for forced labor and starvation. And Li Lu, as a very young child, gets separated from his parents. The exact details aren't fully public. Li Lu doesn't talk about this period much, but from what he has said, he was raised by relatives, moved around a lot, and didn't have a stable family structure for years. Now, imagine being a kid in that environment. You're maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, you don't fully understand what's happening, but you know your parents are gone and the world around you is violent and unpredictable. You're living in poverty, food is scarce, and you're watching people get persecuted for nothing, for reading the wrong book or saying the wrong thing. That experience leaves a mark. It teaches you resilience, adaptability, the importance of being smart and staying quiet when you need to. By the time Li Lu is a teenager in the early 1980s, the Cultural Revolution is over, Mao is dead, and Deng Xiaoping is in charge. China is starting to open up economically, there are reforms happening, and there's this sense among young people that maybe China can change, maybe it can become more free, more prosperous, more modern. Li Lu is smart, really smart. He tests into Nanjing University, one of the top universities in China, and initially he's studying physics. But he's also reading everything he can get his hands on: Western philosophy, economics, political theory, ideas about democracy and freedom that are technically forbidden, but are circulating underground among students. And here's what I find fascinating about this period, because it sets up everything that comes later. Li Lu is not just an academic, he's a thinker. He's trying to understand systems, how societies work, how economies function, why some countries are free and prosperous and others are poor and repressive. He's asking the big questions, and he's realizing that China's authoritarian system is holding the country back. By 1989, Li Lu is in his early 20s, and there's this growing frustration among Chinese students. The economic reforms are happening, but political reform isn't. The government is still authoritarian, there's massive corruption, officials are getting rich while regular people are struggling, and students are angry. They want change. They want freedom of speech. They want the right to criticize the government without being arrested. They want a real say in how their country is run. In April of 1989, Hu Yaobang dies. Hu was a reformist leader within the Communist Party, someone who had been purged for being too liberal, and when he dies, students in Beijing start gathering in Tiananmen Square to mourn him. But it quickly becomes bigger than that. It becomes a protest movement. Students are demanding dialogue with the government, they're demanding political reform, and the movement spreads. Students from universities all over China start coming to Beijing. Li Lu at Nanjing University hears about what's happening and decides to go to Beijing. Now, I don't know his exact thought process here. I mean, I wasn't in his head, but from what I've read, he believed in the cause deeply. He thought this was China's moment to change. And somehow, he ends up becoming one of the student leaders in Tiananmen Square. There are different accounts of how prominent his role was, but multiple sources confirm he was visible. He was speaking at rallies. He was one of the faces of the movement. And think about the psychology of that decision for a second. Li Lu grew up in the Cultural Revolution. He saw what the government is capable of. He knows the risks. And yet he chooses to step forward to make himself visible, to become a leader. That takes either incredible courage or incredible naivety, maybe both. By May of 1989, Tiananmen Square is packed. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of people, students camping out, giving speeches, debating strategy, and the whole world is watching. International journalists are there, cameras everywhere, and for a moment it seems like maybe, just maybe, the Chinese government will negotiate, will give the students something. But then the government declares martial law, troops start moving toward Beijing, and the students have to make a choice, leave or stay. So here's where the story gets really dark, and I want to be clear about what we know versus what we don't. The events of June 3rd into June 4th, 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre, are well documented from multiple sources, survivor accounts, international journalists, leaked Chinese government documents. But Li Lu's specific experience during those hours, that's hazier. He's given a few interviews where he's talked about it, but he doesn't go into detailed specifics, and I think that's partly because it's traumatic and partly because it's dangerous. Even today, decades later, the Chinese government doesn't want people talking about what happened. Here's what we know. In late May, the Chinese government declares martial law. The students know something bad is coming, but there's disagreement about what to do. Some want to leave, they think they've made their point. They've gotten international attention and staying is too risky. Others, including Li Lu from what I've read, want to stay. They believe if they leave, the government wins, the movement dies, and nothing changes. On June 3rd, troops start moving into Beijing. The government has decided to clear the square by force. And that night, June 3rd into the early morning of June 4th, the crackdown happens. Tanks roll in, soldiers start shooting, and chaos erupts. Now, the Chinese government to this day claims that nobody died in Tiananmen Square itself, that the deaths happened in the streets around the square, and that's technically true based on most accounts, but it's a meaningless distinction. Students and civilians were killed, hundreds or maybe thousands, depending on which estimates you believe, and the violence was brutal and indiscriminate. Li Lu was in the square that night. From survivor accounts and his own later statements, he somehow made it out alive. I don't know the exact details of how he escaped, whether he ran, whether someone helped him, whether it was luck or planning, but he survived. And immediately after June 4th, the Chinese government starts hunting the protest leaders. There are arrests, there are executions, and Li Lu's name ends up on a most wanted list. Now think about his situation. He's 23 years old, his face has been on television as one of the protest leaders. The government is actively looking for him, and if they find him, he's facing decades in prison at minimum, possibly execution. He can't go home, he can't contact his family without putting them at risk, and he's got to disappear fast. From what I've pieced together from various sources, Li Lu goes underground. He's moving between safe houses, staying with supporters of the movement, people who are risking their own lives to hide him. And he's trying to figure out how to get out of China. But here's the problem. China's borders are locked down. The government is watching airports, train stations, and anyone trying to leave without proper documents is going to get caught. So how does he get out? This is where the story gets a little murky, and honestly, I've read different versions. But the general consensus from the sources I've found is that Li Lu eventually makes his way to Hong Kong, which at that time is still a British colony, not part of China. Getting to Hong Kong would have required crossing the border illegally, probably with the help of smugglers or sympathizers, and it's dangerous as hell, but somehow he makes it. And once he's in Hong Kong, he's still not safe. I mean, the Chinese government has influence there, but he's got more options. In Hong Kong, Li Lu connects with supporters of the democracy movement, people who are helping refugees from Tiananmen get out of Asia and to the West. And through this network, Li Lu eventually gets to the United States. The exact timeline isn't completely clear, but it seems like within a few months of June 4th, he's in America. He arrives as a refugee, with basically nothing, no money, limited English, and he's traumatized from what he just lived through. But here's what's wild. Most people who go through something like that, being hunted, escaping death, losing everything, they would be destroyed by it. They would need years to recover. Li Lu decides to go to school. He applies to Columbia University in New York, and somehow, think about how hard this is, he gets in. A refugee from China who's been out of formal education because he was busy protesting in Tiananmen Square, and he gets accepted to Columbia. 1989-1990, somewhere in that window, Li Lu arrives in New York City. He's a refugee, he's got some kind of scholarship or financial aid to attend Columbia, and he's starting over from zero. Now, I wish I had more details about his first few months in America, but Li Lu doesn't really talk about this period. What we know comes from a few scattered interviews and from people who knew him at Columbia. He enrolls at Columbia, and here's where it gets interesting. Most students pick one degree, maybe two if they're ambitious. Li Lu decides to get 3 degrees simultaneously. He's doing an undergraduate degree in economics, a law degree, and an MBA, all at the same time. Now, when I first read that, I had to double-check because it sounds insane. But it's documented, Columbia confirms it, and people who knew him say he was just relentlessly driven. Think about what's motivating him. This is a guy who just escaped death, who's separated from his family, who knows he can never go back to China as long as the Communist Party is in power. He's in a foreign country where he barely speaks the language, and he's got zero margin for error. If he fails, he's got nowhere to go, so he works. According to people who knew him at Columbia, he was studying constantly, living on almost no money, and he was obsessed with understanding how the world works, how economies function, how wealth is created. And this is where Li Lu starts developing his investment philosophy, although he doesn't know it yet. He's reading everything: economics, history, philosophy, and he's especially drawn to value investing, the idea that you can find companies that are worth more than their stock price suggests. He reads Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, and he reads Warren Buffett's shareholder letters, and something clicks. Now here's what I find fascinating about this period. Li Lu grew up in poverty in China, lived through the Cultural Revolution, saw how political systems can destroy wealth and opportunity. And then he comes to America and sees the opposite, a country where property rights are protected, where you can start a business without the government crushing you, where capital markets allocate resources efficiently. And he starts to understand that the system matters, that the difference between China and America isn't just culture or history, it's institutions, it's the rule of law, it's free markets. By the mid-1990s, Li Lu is graduating from Columbia with 3 degrees, and he's got to figure out what to do next. He could go work at a law firm, make good money, have a safe career, but that's not what he wants. He wants to invest, he wants to build wealth, and more than that, I think he wants to prove something to himself and maybe to the world, that a refugee with nothing can make it, can become successful, can compete at the highest levels. So in 1997, when Li Lu is around 30 years old, he starts Himalaya Capital Management. This is his own investment fund, and he's starting with basically no money, no track record, and no network. Most hedge fund managers who launch their own funds have spent years at Goldman Sachs or some other big firm. They've got relationships with wealthy clients, they've got seed capital lined up. Li Lu has none of that. He's starting from scratch. And the first few years are brutal. From what I've read, he's struggling to raise money, he's managing a tiny amount of capital, and he's trying to prove that his investment strategy works. His approach is classic value investing, finding companies that are trading below their intrinsic value, buying them and holding them for years while the market catches up. But in the late 1990s, that strategy looks stupid. This is the dot-com boom. Everyone's making money on internet stocks that have no earnings, no profits, just hype and growth. Value investing is dead, or so everyone says. Li Lu sticks to his strategy. He doesn't chase the tech bubble, he doesn't buy the hyped-up internet stocks, and that means he's underperforming the market. His investors are probably frustrated, wondering why they're with this unknown manager who's missing out on the boom, but Li Lu doesn't change course. He remembers what he learned studying history and economics, that bubbles always pop, that prices eventually reflect reality, and that the way to build long-term wealth is to buy great companies at reasonable prices and hold them. And then 2000 happens, 2001, 2002, the tech bubble bursts, the dot-com stocks collapse, trillions of dollars of market value evaporate, and suddenly value investing looks smart again. Li Lu's fund doesn't blow up because he wasn't in the bubble stocks, and now he's got an opportunity. All these companies that were ignored during the tech boom, they're trading at bargain prices, and Li Lu starts buying. His performance turns around. From 2000 to 2005, Himalaya Capital starts putting up strong returns, and Li Lu is starting to get noticed. He's still relatively unknown. He's not out there marketing himself. He's not doing interviews or going on CNBC, but within the value investing community, people are starting to hear about this guy. Now here's where the story gets really interesting, because this is where Charlie Munger enters the picture. Charlie Munger, if you don't know, is Warren Buffett's partner at Berkshire Hathaway. Munger is famous for being even more selective than Buffett, for having these incredibly high standards, and for being blunt, sarcastic, and unwilling to suffer fools. He's also famous for being loyal to the few people he respects, and for some reason, he takes an interest in Li Lu. The first meeting between Li Lu and Munger happened sometime in the mid-2000s, and from what I've read, it was arranged through mutual connections in the value investing world. Now, I don't know the exact details of that first conversation. I mean, I wasn't in the room, but here's what we know. Munger is impressed, and Munger is not easily impressed. He's met thousands of investors, hedge fund managers, MBA graduates, all trying to pitch him on their brilliance, and Munger usually sees through it in about 5 minutes. But with Li Lu, something is different. From interviews Munger gave later, he said that Li Lu had this rare combination of intelligence, discipline, and integrity. Munger talked about how Li Lu understood both Western and Chinese culture, how he had this deep understanding of value investing principles, and how he wasn't trying to get rich quick or make a name for himself. Li Lu was focused on long-term compounding, on building real wealth over decades, and that's exactly how Munger thinks. So Munger starts investing his own money with Li Lu, and this is a huge deal. Munger is worth billions of dollars. He's one of the most successful investors in history, and he's notoriously skeptical of giving his money to other managers. He and Buffett have always believed in managing their own money, not trusting outside managers, but Munger trusts Li Lu. Over the next few years, the relationship deepens. Munger and Li Lu start meeting regularly, talking about investments, about China, about business. And Munger starts introducing Li Lu to other people in his network. He's essentially vouching for Li Lu, telling people, this guy is the real deal. If you're smart, you'll pay attention to him. Now, why does Munger trust Li Lu so much? This is speculation on my part, but I think it's a few things. First, Li Lu's track record is strong. His fund is putting up consistent returns, he's avoiding stupid mistakes, and he's demonstrating the discipline to stick to his strategy even when it's unpopular. Second, Li Lu's background, his life story, that matters to Munger. Munger respects people who have overcome adversity, who have built themselves up from nothing, who have shown grit and resilience. Li Lu is not some privileged kid who went to Harvard and got a job at a hedge fund. He's a refugee who survived a massacre and built a successful career through pure intelligence and work ethic. And third, and I think this is key, Li Lu understands China. By the mid-2000s, China is becoming an economic superpower, growing at insane rates, and Munger knows that understanding China is going to be critical for investors over the next few decades. But most Western investors don't really understand China. They don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture, the business practices, the political system. Li Lu understands all of it. He's Chinese, he grew up there, he speaks Mandarin fluently, and he's got connections and insights that no Western investor can replicate. So Munger starts calling Li Lu his secret weapon. And when Munger uses that phrase in interviews, it's not hyperbole. He means it. Li Lu is giving Munger access to investments in China that Munger couldn't evaluate on his own. And more than that, Li Lu is educating Munger about how to think about Chinese companies, what to look for, what risks to watch for, how to value businesses in a system that's part capitalist and part authoritarian. One of the investments that comes out of this relationship is BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle and battery company. Now, the story of how Berkshire invested in BYD is fascinating, and Li Lu's role is central to it. This is 2008, 2009, around the financial crisis. BYD is a relatively small Chinese company making batteries and electric cars, and it's not on most Western investors' radar. But Li Lu knows about it, he's done the research, and he tells Munger, this company is special. The founder Wang Chuanfu is a genius, and this is going to be huge. Munger looks at it and he's skeptical at first. I mean, it's a Chinese company, there are governance risks, it's in a competitive industry. But Li Lu walks him through it, explains the technology, the cost advantages, the growth potential, and Munger decides to invest. Berkshire Hathaway puts $230 million into BYD in 2008, buying about 10% of the company. Now that investment turned out to be one of Berkshire's best. BYD stock went up something like 25 times over the next decade, turning that $230 million into billions. And Munger has said publicly that he wouldn't have made that investment without Li Lu. Li Lu was the one who found it, vetted it, and convinced Munger it was worth the risk. So by the late 2000s, Li Lu is in this unique position. He's got Charlie Munger's endorsement, he's managing money for some of the wealthiest families in the world, and he's become the go-to person for Western investors who want exposure to China but don't know how to evaluate Chinese companies. And his performance is strong. Himalaya Capital is putting up returns that rival some of the best funds in the world. But here's what's interesting, Li Lu is still almost completely unknown to the general public. He doesn't do interviews, he doesn't go on TV, he doesn't write books or give speeches. If you search for information about him, there's almost nothing, and that's deliberate. Li Lu values his privacy, and I think there are a few reasons for that. First, he's still technically a dissident, a refugee who's wanted by the Chinese government. Even though he's a US citizen now, the Chinese government has a long memory, and they don't forget people who were involved in Tiananmen. If Li Lu were high profile, if he were constantly in the media, that could create problems for him or for his family members who might still be in China. Second, Li Lu learned from Munger and Buffett that staying out of the spotlight has advantages. When you're not famous, you can operate more freely, you can make investments without everyone copying you, and you don't have to deal with the noise and distraction of public attention. And third, and this is just my read on it, I think Li Lu is genuinely focused on the work, on finding great investments and compounding wealth for his clients. He's not interested in being a celebrity investor. Now, what's Li Lu's investment philosophy? This is where it gets really interesting, because he's synthesized ideas from Western value, investing with insights about Chinese business and culture. From what I've gleaned from the few talks he's given, and from people who know him, Li Lu's approach is 1. Focus on quality. He's looking for companies with strong competitive advantages, great management teams, and businesses that can grow for decades. He's not interested in cigar butts, companies that are cheap but mediocre. He wants great companies at fair prices. 2. Think long-term. Li Lu holds investments for years, sometimes decades. He's not trading in and out. He's not trying to time the market. He's compounding wealth over time. 3. Understand the culture and the system. This is where his Chinese background gives him an edge. He understands how Chinese companies operate, how decisions get made, what the risks are from government intervention, and how to evaluate management teams in a culture that's very different from the West. 4. Be patient and selective. Li Lu is willing to wait for the right opportunity. He's not swinging at every pitch. He's got a concentrated portfolio, probably 10 to 15 stocks at most, and each one represents a high-conviction bet. And 5. Focus on learning. Li Lu is constantly reading, studying, trying to understand industries and businesses at a deep level. He's not relying on models or algorithms. He's doing old-school fundamental analysis, reading annual reports, visiting companies, talking to customers and competitors. This philosophy has served him incredibly well. Himalaya Capital's returns over the years have been exceptional, although exact numbers are hard to find because Li Lu doesn't publicize them. But from what's leaked out and from estimates by people in the industry, his fund has likely compounded at something like 20 to 30% annually over 2 decades, which would put him in the top tier of global investors. But here's the thing about success at that level: it creates new challenges. As Li Lu's fund grew, as he managed more and more money, it became harder to find opportunities. When you're managing tens of millions, you can invest in small companies that can double or triple. When you're managing billions, you need bigger opportunities, and those are harder to find. So Li Lu has adapted. From what I understand, he's focused more on large-cap Chinese companies, businesses that are big enough to absorb significant capital, but that are still undervalued. And he's also become more selective, raising the bar for what he'll invest in. Now let's talk about why Charlie Munger called Li Lu his secret weapon, because that phrase tells you a lot. Munger is not given to exaggeration. He doesn't praise people lightly, and when he uses military language like secret weapon, he means it literally. Li Lu was giving Munger something he couldn't get anywhere else: access to the most important growth story of the 21st century, China's rise, combined with the analytical rigor and integrity to navigate it safely. By the 2010s, China has become the second largest economy in the world, growing at rates that seem impossible, 7 to 10% GDP growth year after year. And there are massive wealth creation opportunities for investors who can identify the right companies. But there are also massive risks. Chinese companies don't always follow Western accounting standards. Corporate governance can be weak. The government can intervene in business decisions, and there are concerns about fraud and transparency. Most Western investors look at China and either stay away completely or invest blindly in index funds or ADRs, American depository receipts, without really understanding what they own. Li Lu was offering a third-way, deep fundamental analysis of individual Chinese companies, with an insider's understanding of the culture and the system, combined with Western value investing discipline. And Munger trusted him completely. In interviews, Munger said that Li Lu had better judgment about Chinese investments than anyone he'd ever met, including himself. And for Munger to admit that, to say that someone else has better judgment than him about anything, that's extraordinary. The relationship between Munger and Li Lu went beyond just money. They became friends. Munger is 40+ years older than Li Lu, but they connected intellectually. They would have these long conversations about philosophy, about history, about how to think about the world. And Munger became a mentor to Li Lu, not just in investing, but in life. When Munger passed away in late 2023, and I'm going off public record here, at the age of 99, Li Lu gave one of the eulogies. And from what was reported, it was emotional, personal, and it was clear that Munger had been not just a business partner, but a father figure to Li Lu. Remember, Li Lu had been separated from his own father during the Cultural Revolution, and while I don't know the full details of his family situation, it seems like Munger filled some of that role. Now, where is Li Lu today? He's still running Himalaya Capital, still managing money for a small group of wealthy clients, and he's still almost completely out of the public eye. There are rumors that he manages some or all of the Munger family's wealth, although that's not confirmed. And he's probably worth hundreds of millions or possibly over $1 billion himself at this point. Although again, exact numbers are impossible to find because he's so private. But here's what's clear: Li Lu has achieved something remarkable. He went from being a refugee with nothing, literally hunted by his own government, to becoming one of the most successful and respected investors in the world, trusted by Charlie Munger with billions of dollars. And he did it through intelligence, discipline, and an uncompromising commitment to his principles. Now let's zoom out and talk about the pattern here, because Li Lu's story isn't just about one individual's success. It's about a specific set of strategies and principles that show up repeatedly in the stories of people who build extraordinary wealth and influence. First pattern: survival mode as training. Li Lu grew up in the Cultural Revolution, lived through Tiananmen, escaped as a refugee. Most people would be destroyed by that level of trauma and instability. But for some people, and Li Lu seems to be one of them, that experience becomes a source of strength. It teaches resilience, adaptability, the ability to function under pressure. And it gives you a perspective that people who have had comfortable lives don't have. Li Lu knows what real risk looks like. He knows what it's like to have everything on the line, and that makes him less afraid of market volatility or business challenges. Second pattern: intellectual humility and relentless learning. One thing that comes through in every account of Li Lu is that he's always learning, always reading, always trying to understand things at a deeper level. He's not arrogant, he's not assuming he knows everything. And that's critical in investing because markets change, industries evolve, and if you're not constantly updating your knowledge, you get left behind. Third pattern: finding mentors and earning trust. Li Lu didn't just stumble into a relationship with Charlie Munger, he earned it. He demonstrated competence, integrity, and a genuine commitment to the principles Munger values. And once he had Munger's trust, he protected it. He didn't take advantage of it. He didn't get sloppy or overconfident. Building relationships with people who are more experienced and successful than you, and then proving you're worthy of those relationships, that's a huge accelerant for success. Fourth pattern: patience and long-term thinking. Li Lu is playing the long game. He's not trying to get rich quick. He's not chasing fads. He's building wealth through compounding over decades. And that requires discipline, the ability to ignore short-term noise and stick to your strategy even when it's unpopular. And fifth pattern: using adversity as an advantage. Li Lu's background, being Chinese, understanding both Eastern and Western culture, that's his competitive edge. He didn't try to hide his refugee status or pretend to be someone he wasn't. He leaned into it. He used his unique perspective to find opportunities that other investors couldn't see. But there's also a cost to this story, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. Li Lu lost years with his family during the Cultural Revolution. He went through the trauma of Tiananmen, watching friends and fellow students get killed. He spent decades unable to return to his home country. And even now, even with all his success, he's living in a kind of exile. That's the price he paid for his beliefs, for standing up to an authoritarian government, and for choosing freedom over safety. And I think that's something we forget sometimes when we talk about successful people. We see the wealth, the accomplishments, the recognition, but we don't always see the sacrifices, the trauma, the things they gave up or lost along the way. So why does Li Lu's story matter today? What can we learn from it that's applicable right now, in 2024, 2025, as we're dealing with our own set of challenges and opportunities? First, the China question is more relevant than ever. US-China relations are tense, there's talk of decoupling, there are concerns about Taiwan, about trade, about technology competition. And investors are trying to figure out, should I be investing in Chinese companies or is that too risky? Li Lu's approach offers a framework. He's not blindly bullish on China, he's selective. He's focused on specific companies with strong competitive positions, and he's managing the political risk by diversifying and staying informed. That's a more nuanced approach than either avoiding China completely or investing in everything. Second, the value of deep expertise and specialization. Li Lu didn't try to be a generalist investor who dabbles in everything. He focused on an area where he had a unique advantage, Chinese companies, and he became the best in the world at evaluating them. In a world where information is abundant and competition is fierce, having a narrow focus where you can be truly expert is incredibly valuable. Third, the importance of integrity and long-term relationships. Li Lu's success is built on trust. Munger trusted him, wealthy families trust him, and that trust was earned through years of consistent behavior. In a business world that often rewards short-term thinking and aggressive self-promotion, Li Lu's approach is a reminder that playing the long game and prioritizing reputation over quick wins can be more effective. Fourth, the refugee story. Li Lu is one of many examples of immigrants and refugees who come to the West with nothing and end up achieving extraordinary success. And that's not an accident. There's something about the immigrant experience, the combination of hunger, resilience, and appreciation for opportunity, that creates a powerful drive to succeed. If you're someone who's facing adversity right now, who's starting from a disadvantaged position, Li Lu's story shows that it's possible to overcome it, but it requires relentless effort and a long-term mindset. And fifth, the power of mentorship. Li Lu didn't do this alone. He had Charlie Munger, a mentor who believed in him, taught him, opened doors for him. And in turn, Li Lu was a good mentee. He listened, he learned, he proved himself worthy of Munger's investment of time and trust. If you're early in your career, finding mentors who can guide you and advocate for you is one of the highest leverage things you can do. Now there are also risks and challenges with Li Lu's approach. Concentrated portfolios, the kind Li Lu runs, can be incredibly volatile. If one of your big positions goes wrong, it can wipe out years of gains. And investing in China specifically comes with political risk that's impossible to fully hedge. The Chinese government can change policies overnight. They can crack down on entire industries. They can make it difficult for foreign investors to get their money out. Li Lu understands these risks better than anyone, but they're still real. And there's the question of succession. Li Lu is in his late 50s now. Presumably he's thinking about what happens to Himalaya Capital when he eventually retires or steps back. Will the fund continue? Will he bring in partners? Will he close it down and return money to investors? I don't know, and there's no public information about his plans. But it's a question that matters for his investors and for anyone studying his approach. So that's the story of Li Lu. That's how a student protester who escaped the Tiananmen Square massacre ended up becoming Charlie Munger's secret weapon and one of the most successful investors nobody's ever heard of. From the Cultural Revolution to Colombia, to building Himalaya Capital, to earning the trust of one of the greatest investors who ever lived. It's a story of survival, intelligence, discipline, and the power of long-term thinking. Now look, I'm sure there are details I got wrong here. I mean, I wasn't there for most of this, and Li Lu is so private that a lot of information simply isn't public. I've pieced this together from the limited interviews he's given, from Munger's comments about him, from people in the investment community who know him, and from public records where they exist. But the core story, the pattern of how he built his life and career, that's solid. And the lessons about resilience, about learning, about patience, about integrity, those are universal. If you're someone who's interested in investing, in building wealth, in understanding how exceptional people think and operate, Li Lu's story is a masterclass. He's not flashy, he's not famous, he doesn't have a best-selling book or a podcast. But he's done the work, he's achieved the results, and he's earned the respect of people who don't respect easily. And if you're someone who's facing adversity right now, who's starting from a difficult position, Li Lu's story is proof that it's possible to overcome it. It won't be easy. It'll take years or decades of relentless effort, but it's possible. You just have to be willing to do the work, to learn constantly, to play the long game, and to never give up on yourself. That's what I found in the research over the last week. I'm Alex Morgan. Thanks for listening to Behind the Billion. Alright, so that's the deep dive on Li Lu, the refugee who became Charlie Munger's secret weapon. From Tiananmen Square to managing billions, from being hunted by the Chinese government to earning the trust of one of the greatest investment minds in history. 6 degrees at Columbia, decades of disciplined value investing, and a level of success that most people never even dream of. Now look, some of the details here are hard to verify because Li Lu is so intensely private, but the overall pattern is clear and documented. If this kind of research and storytelling is valuable to you, if you want to understand how these extraordinary people built their careers and their fortunes, not the sanitized version, but the real story with all the complexity and nuance, hit that subscribe button. I release new episodes every single day, deep dives into the people and companies that shape the world. I'm Alex Morgan. See you tomorrow.